Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
Now then, so it's getting to the time. The Six Nations launch was in London this afternoon. We have Matt Williams with us and Keith Wood. Evening, gents.
Good evening, Joe.
So, as captain and coach, respectively, in your time, you've both had your day in London, I presume, launching the Six Nations. It's a bit of a free-for-all. You've been asked questions from all angles. Did you have any particular mindset going in, Matt? Was it to plant a few bombs? Were you speaking to your players, to the opposition, or trying to say nothing?
Do all of the above. You probably weren't trying to. I never try to plant a few bombs because I just don't believe in that. I think if you say something as a coach, quite often there's something stupid like trying to plant a bomb, and your players are the people that pay the price. I think we saw that last year with some of the things Eddie Jones said. He was sitting in the stand, but these boys, they had to cop the anger of what he said. It's a pretty amazing day. I got to say, the first time I went to it, I was a bit blown away. I remember just sitting there going, gee, this is big. This is bigger than I thought it was. It's just that many people and that much interest compared to almost anything I'd seen in the Southern Hemisphere and anything I'd done with club. And I imagine it's on steroids today, it'd be even bigger. I just remember sitting there just going, wow, this is something else, isn't it? And it's like, and that's why it's the best annual tournament in the world by a country mile. It is amazing, but you've got to, as a coach, I think less as a player, but as a coach, you've really got to watch what you say, because everyone's trying to read into what you say and try and twist it round and trying to turn it back to bite you, which makes it, unfortunately, for the people out there in the media, a lot of the time coaches don't say much at all because they're too scared. I mean, Eddie Jones seems to be the permanent exception to that rule, but it was something that was pretty extraordinary to experience.
Yeah, Keith?
I did about 10 of them, would you believe? Wow. 5 as captain and 5 with the sponsors after I retired. And I have to say, the first time I turned up, it was amazing. And you kind of forget, too, that, you play the game, you love the game, but you're also a fan of the game. So you're getting to see and spend time with coaches and other captains and other former players that are in and around there. There's something exciting about it. After a couple of times, that wears off very quickly. It's an absolute slogfest. You're rushed from one spot to the next for a photograph, for an interview, for a group of interviews, for the next group of interviews. And it's interesting what Maddie says. You don't want to throw a bomb because you can't remember what you've said the next time you go up. And actually, I remember thinking that you needed to be original. When you're 24 or 5 and you're captain, you're trying to figure out exactly what it is you're supposed to do. And you think, well, I can't say the same thing I said the last time because that's boring for them. But of course, you've already moved on to somebody else. And so you do end up saying, and we wouldn't have been particularly media trained, but you end up saying the same thing. And it's as if this is by rote and you just bang it out again. I will admit that in the last couple of years, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I gave a different answer to questions for everything. I said Italy were favourites, England were favourites, Ireland. Depending on who I was, I shouldn't really have been there at that stage. It kind of passed me by, and I found a bit of humour where it was. It's a necessary evil. I get interested at times to the idea of content, and this is the moment that all the media partners, all the newspapers, everybody gets an opportunity to gather as much content as possible. But I think most of that content is nearly obsolete in 2 or 3 days' time if something else happens or a match happens or a guy gets injured. So it's one of those, it's kind of mad. It's a cattle mart, actually.
Yeah. To that end, on the point about it dating very quickly, let's bring people some of what was being said today then. So we'll start with Joe Schmidt, naturally enough. Here he is talking about a few different points. And first of all, his successor, Andy Farrell.
He's been given the job and he's very, very good at his job. He's added value in our environment. He's also, we wanted continuity. Now, it was far from my decision, so it's not for me to say. But when I was asked, I didn't hesitate to endorse Andy, because he brings a real clarity of thought. He brings an understanding, and he certainly understands either side of the ball. He could coach attack as well as defence. So I think that flexibility is really good as well. And you know, I think Simon Easterby is very, very good coach, and he could potentially have done the job. Probably hasn't had quite the same breadth of experience that Andy's had, and certainly not, you know, the dual international experience that Andy's had, both as a player and as a coach, coaching in England setup as well as our setup. So, yeah, I think he'll do a super job. I think there's good continuity, and there's a good foundation with the young players that are putting up their hand around the country as well.
The big talking point when you announced your squad was Ross Byrne being left out. So just to ask you briefly, are you just looking for a reaction for him, but as well as the fact that Jack Carty has earned his place there as well?
Yeah, I'm not looking for a reaction. I'm looking for Ross to keep building the way he has been. We've invested a fair bit of time in Ross, and the one thing, if you invest time in Ross, he'll double that up himself, and he's been working really hard on his game. He probably hasn't had quite the same fluency of starts that he had this time last year. He had a lot of starts in the early part of the season. Johnny's been playing a little bit more often, and that hasn't probably allowed him to get the same foothold that he had last time, where Jack's had a lot of game time, and he's made really good use of it, to be fair to Jack. His line kicking, his managing of the game, his goal kicking has been really improved, and so everything's a contest. You know, we'll go into a contest in 10 days time, which will be at the very height of contest, you know, for us. But everything's a contest, from training to selection to you know, that final preparation into a match, and then there's a new contest the next week. So, you know, Ross is still very much in the forefront of our thinking, you know. But then you've got other guys who weren't involved, saying, they put their hand up and say, "What about me?" You know, Billy Burns, great chip ahead for Ballacoon to score that try that made the difference, Ulster v Leicester in the weekend. So, you know, that's a real positive for us, that there are guys pushing through and keeping pressure on. Obviously, Billy's got some good experience. Jack is building experience, as is Ross, and as is Joey. Whereas Johnny's established that experience. But Johnny, the great thing about Johnny is he's pushing himself. He wants to learn. He wants to grow the game and the way he manages the game. So, yeah, they're tough decisions, and I'd be the first to put my hand up and say we don't get them all right all the time.
Just on injuries, Joe, Johnny Sexton, is he good to go for England now, or?
Yeah, I would be super confident there, because he trained yesterday, and it was very light yesterday, because there were guys who played on Sunday, a lot of guys who played on Sunday, and other guys. You know, you go three derbies in a row, where you go to Europe, 3 derbies and 2 more Europe. That can be a little bit attritional. So it's just allowing them a little bit of a quiet return, a light run, or a light bit of individual skill stuff today, and then we hit the ground running tomorrow.
And then just unfortunate, obviously, then to lose Ian Henderson and Ty Burn to injury over the weekend. Yeah,
gutted for them. You know, Ian Henderson has six weeks out, comes back, man of the match in a massive game for Ulster. Ty Burn, he'd had 2 clean turnovers. He was playing incredibly well against Exeter, who were physically formidable, and he was hanging in there, doing a great job. He's got line-out acumen as well, and so those 2 guys are a loss. But you know, Alton had been really good in his previous game against Sale, and Quinn Roo had been super for us in November. So, you know, that's what we're trying to have. We're trying to be able to substitute guys in that aren't too far off, and we're already in competition with the guys that we're missing.
So that was the bulk of the Joe Schmidt with the radio crew this afternoon in London. Just one much shorter clip just to play you. So Eddie Jones separately has said that Ireland are the best team in the world, and naturally this was put to Joe. Coming? Not coming? Not coming. Okay. In short, Joe Schmidt said, yeah, I wish. Margins are tight. We did win a lot of games last year. We could have lost a lot of them very easily. So he batted that one away. But then he talked about how he had walked past Eddie Jones in the corridor, and Jones said to him, I'm going to lob a few grenades in. And Schmidt started laughing to himself and doesn't know if Jones is telling the truth or not telling the truth or what he's going to do. And he said, Jones also said, I'm going to pop over and have a look at your training, given the Bielsa Spygate stuff cross-channel as well. I got the distinct impression, to be honest, Keith, that rather than being fazed or bothered by Eddie Jones, Joe Schmidt quite enjoys Eddie Jones.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I do find a lot of the grenades that are described that are thrown over. I don't like them. I just don't like them in the game, actually. I think they're kind of an unnecessary element. And there's a lot of that is the key of deflection, trying to move some of the pressure off himself and off his team. I don't know whether he likes it or not, really. You kind of often feel like when somebody says to you, I'm going to get them when I get the chance, whether that is the case with Joe or not, I don't know. I know in times past we'd have had things written up and stuck up on the wall when you're inside in the changing rooms to just in case you needed any impetus to go on any further.
Yeah.
I do feel most of that, not all of it, but most of that has moved on. It is about the process, and unattractive and all as that sounds, it doesn't have to be about spite or anything, So it's, I think Eddie Jones is actually under significant pressure, and I know there's no irony in me saying that because I'm not involved in the Irish rugby squad, but that's the comments that we would make from the outside, is that they did really well in the autumn, but they need to back that up with something. And I think this first game for us is just incredibly tough. I'm looking forward to it too. But
there's no doubt. The other Schmidt comments, Matt, I might just get your thoughts on. He was asked about the lines, and so he's he hasn't ruled himself out totally. So what he's saying is that he absolutely wants 12 months out when he finishes up at the end of the World Cup. He was asked specifically about leading the lines, and he said, I wouldn't be available if asked at the moment. Which is a good line. He said, I said to my wife that we'll get these 12 months done, and then she said, you'll last 12 days, potentially without needing to do something. So she's a bit sceptical. And the word is Gatland's had informal talks with Lions bosses. He seems to be open to South Africa in 2021. What do you think about Schmidt and the Lions and the lack of lead-in time? Do you think he'd enjoy it, or would it drive him nuts, Matt?
Look, I think you're hearing things there that Joe, to me, looks really tired. I don't think I'm not suggesting he's not 100% dedicated or giving everything he's got to it. I don't mean that at all. But there's a price to pay for everything you do in life, and what he's doing now is incredibly stressful and demanding, and sort of on the lines of what we were talking with Keith about just then. Like, he's just a class person, and I think he loves the game. I know he loves the game, and I don't think he would. That's why I don't think he enjoys what Eddie does. He throws the comments in and all that, because I think he would see it as disrespectful to people in the game. And Joe's, you hear him talk about his players there, how respectful he is speaking about the players and how much empathy he has for people with selection. So he want to do a perfect job. He want to do a great job. I think he'd be a fantastic Lions coach because he's a collaborative guy. He can bring people in. He's very, very detailed. I personally think the Lions need a change. Certainly, some of the feedback was coming back from tour. It just needs every now and then, as wonderful a record as Gaddy has, it probably needs a bit of a change there, and I think he'd be great at it. I just don't know if personally he's ready for that, because there's a whole lot of things we don't know, as we're saying, about his family, and that comes first. He's given a lot. His family have given him a lot to do his job. I know, because I've had the same thing, and you've got to give a bit back at some stage there.
Yeah, who do you give first refusal to on the Lions, Keith, personally?
I think there's a lot of conversations that happen at the start. It's a long way out, and you're looking for a guy that is available. And I know that sounds kind of wrong because it's such a big deal. But it is a big deal that requires an awful lot of admin that's done that isn't as intense as some of the other stuff. Of course, there's media and elements of that, but the tour itself is only a number of weeks. 6, 7, 8 weeks tops now. So the intensity is huge, but it's for that period of time. For someone as organised as Joe Schmidt, I think he'd be able to put all that together and not consider that something that impinges too much on his time. I think he'd like to be obsessively over everything, but it isn't over every player every minute of every day. And I think there probably is the window for him in that instance. And it depends what Gatland wants to do. I mean, I read some of the comments about him over the weekend. He's thinking, he'd like to go back to New Zealand and coach a super side, or maybe he'd like to go back into Premiership coaching in the UK or maybe in France. And maybe he's now talking to the Lions. I think he's doing what a coach who's going to be finished his job in 9 months is supposed to do. He's casting out the net to see what's out there. So I don't know who you go to first. I think it would be really interesting to see how Joe Schmidt his take on the Lions would be. I think Gatland has done very well in the last couple.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, who?
I'd go for Joe Schmidt, of course. Okay. Yeah.
On to England then. Eddie Jones, this is just a short clip, so he's making the point here, if nothing else, about the quality on show across this Six Nations. Have a quick listen.
Well, I think you just got to look at the world rankings. Ireland's second in the world, Wales are third, Scotland's fifth, we're fourth. That's 4 of the top 5 sides in the world playing this competition.
Eddie, Ireland have big problems in the second row. They've lost a couple of big players there. Does that make your job any easier?
Well, they got good depth. They've still got James, Ryan and Toner at least to pick from, so I'm sure they're going to put out a strong side.
Do you think the success of the Irish provinces will feed into the Irish team this year?
Well, I think they've got a well-coordinated system, where they've got 4 teams feeding into the national side. All their programs are monitored. They've got a very, very good system, and they're seeing the fruits of that with their national team, seeing the fruits of that with their professional team.
Finally, Eddie, Joe Schmidt claims you've been throwing a few grenades today. Something you go along with?
Well, I don't know what I've said, mate, but if that's the way you want to portray it, then there's been bombs going off everywhere. I don't know where they are, though.
So, he can be cranky. I think at one point Schmidt referenced the bat phone comment that he made about Sexton. In Eddie Jones's now annual reference to some aspect of Johnny Sexton, Schmidt referenced that. So on they go. I'll reclassify my question where I said I think he enjoys Eddie Jones. He's not rattled by it anyway, Matt. He can take it in his stride, Joe Schmidt. I don't think it's keeping him up at night.
No, not at all. Eddie's come through the system back at the turn of the century of Rod McQueen, and Rod always, you had Agenda A and Agenda B. Agenda A was what you say within the team, so what you're really saying, what your tactics are and what you're doing, and Agenda B was what you say to the media. And, that Eddie hasn't deviated from that in 20 years, and he's got his own out half there that's done a couple of late high shots. He's a very, very good player. Farrell, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of him, but that's just reality. And what's he done? He's taken away the focus from the referees saying, well, if he does another high shot, will he be carded in the game, to saying, well, Johnny does all the refereeing in the game, the referee shouldn't listen to him. So he's just trying to deflect the dialogue and the discussion away from what other people might do. And, you got to understand that it's very successful because the vast majority of journalists, he throws a little bit of meat out there, and the vast majority of rugby journos chase it.
Yeah.
He was talking about his fullback playing 7 the other day. I heard it, I just started laughing. I thought, oh my God, but that's him, and he's an older guy, and he's It's like Keith said. He's sick of doing all this. He's sick of doing all these things, and he just goes out and stuffs around with it. But I think, I'm not sure if it's been said. I don't have any information around that. But last year, I thought his team, as I said before, his team paid a price. Like what he was saying before they went up to Scotland, I know the modern way, we're only going to put one guy in the ruck. And, of course, the Scots flooded the ruck and they got turned over left, right and centre. Yeah. He was hugely disrespectful to the Welsh 10 and before the game. And, the Welsh boys didn't like it. And they came out and they should have won that game. There was a TMO error that stopped them from winning. I just think it's not smart. It's not... Eddie's a really good coach, a really hard worker, and he's been around a long time. He deserves a lot of our credit and our admiration. Instead, a lot of people sort of saying, "Look, that's pretty undignified," and I don't like him doing it personally.
Regarding how England are shaping up, then Keith. So Billy Vunipola's back at Saracens. He has made 3 starts for England in 2 years. It's been an extraordinary run, and then Tuilagi as well. Last started for England in 2013. So those two suddenly back for how long, we don't know, but they're back. The other interesting thing then is, this time last year, Jones was still very much married to the Ford and Farrell combination of 10 and 12. You look at his most recent backline for New Zealand, he went with Slade and Teo in the centre and started with Farrell. It does seem like he's largely abandoned the Ford-Farrell concept at this point anyway.
He seems to have. I know Slade has... a lot of the handling, I think, that might counteract the fact of not having a second 5'8" in the team. I think for the first time in a long time, England actually look very dangerous. They've most of their players back. Is that right? Is that date you said for...
Tuilagi, yeah. I read it about an hour ago and I had to double check it. So I might triple check it as you're talking. It's hard to fathom his last start for England would be 2013. I'll double check it again. Billy Vunipola is certainly 3 starts in 2 years. Okay,
and irrespective of the Tuilagi, he hasn't started for a while. Yeah. We can say that. And he's come back to almost premature fanfare at every occasion since. Hasn't had a sustained period of time playing. Is an incredibly destructive player when he's on song. He looks like he's slimmed up a little. He looks very, very fit. He's played well, but he's made mistakes while he's come back. So those mistakes get highlighted the further up the tree you go. And once you get to Ireland in the first match... Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. A Six Nations match, 2013. That certainly is the stat. So he's been thereabouts. But it's the last time in a Six Nations match, Manu Tuilagi is going to start for England. But I think he is a great player when he's playing well. When he's playing for a period of time. So whether he's played enough to get back to those levels or not, and whether he can heighten the manner in which he plays in an international, which he probably can. But I think he is a proper threat, and he may be a guy to bring off the bench almost, not to start with. Billy Vunipola, on the other hand, is the big run of games that England won. Was it 18 or 19 games that they won? He was at number 8 for the vast majority of those, if not all of them, and he was a phenomenon. And so things haven't gone well for him back. He's broken his arm 3 times, I think it is. Yeah, I was listening to Matt Dawson on his podcast the other evening, and he was looking at some of Vunipola's return performances, and he's seeing a reluctance to put that arm in any kind of vulnerable position. If someone's in tight to him with the tackle, he'll throw his body at him. But as for sticking out that arm to try and stop someone, he's worried about it, as you would be. Well, he admitted to that. Yeah. He admitted to that in one of the articles over the last week or 10 days, that he was trying to ease his way into it. There's a certain level of that, and I often think it depends on the injury. There's certain injuries you say, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'll throw it into the mill and see what happens. There's other ones you tend to be more circumspect. Neck injuries, but for him, breaking an arm 3 times is, twice is the same break as far as I know. Like that, of course, is a doubt. And I know I had 12 shoulder operations, and I used to kind of go back at a really good surgeon, but I'd go back and think, well, he said I'm fine. And strangely, I never re-hurt one of those injuries in a short period of time after coming back. Right. they were all slightly different. So instead of it being my shoulder, it was my collarbone, or it was the other collarbone,
Yeah.
So I think you get your head around it, but it's hard for him to get his head around it like if we've looked at any of the English-Irish games in the Heineken Cup, in the European Cup, they have been the most attritional. They've been the most physical. So I think we can be pretty safe with the idea that the match at the start of February is going to be brutal.
Yeah. The word today, Owen Farrell very much going to be fit, Matt. He's had thumb surgery. Dan Robson, who scored that try against Leinster at the weekend, is in the squad as well. So England with Vunipola and Tuilagi, as Keith says, there's a sense that maybe they have turned a corner and they're going to arrive in Dublin, pitch up in pretty good shape.
Oh, without doubt. They just lost to New Zealand in November, and Ireland just defeated New Zealand. Now, I know there's a big difference in joy, but England played really well against New Zealand. They walloped Australia, and I hate to say it, we're going to see a lot more of that happening around the world in the next few years, which is another subject. But look, last year they lost their way. This time last year, the week before the Six Nations last year, England were the team to beat. We were all sitting here talking about England. We weren't saying that Ireland are really on line for a Grand Slam. We knew Ireland would be there or thereabouts, but England were the team. And England completely and utterly stuffed up last year's Six Nations. Yeah. Like most English sides, and I'm talking about all sports, once they start believing their own press and they're totally infallible and they're going to win everything, and their press start and they believe it, that's when they fail. They do it at cricket, they do it at do it at rugby, they do it at rugby league. Every time, that's when they're at their weakest. When they've got blood dripping off their chin, that someone's just put a good right one on their nose, and that's what's happened the last 12 months, that's when they're most dangerous. Yeah. When they've got something to prove. And they've got something to prove. Ireland humiliated them at Twickenham last year, and it doesn't matter which way you cut that up. It was a wonderful day for Irish rugby, but there was a serious amount of English humble pie to be had, and they're coming for revenge. And you can understand why. I think they'll be a better side than last year. Those losses will have taught them a lot. They turned some corners in South Africa, and I think, like Keith said, this is a pretty good English side, and it's going to be unbelievably physical, and it's going to be for 80 minutes. And that bench is going to play a very, very big role. And again, in my opinion, whoever has got more points on the board at the Aviva on the first round will win the Six Nations. It's simple as that. On the
physicality point, a quick listen to Brian O'Driscoll. He was on OTBAM this morning. You can watch the full interview on YouTube, but here he is talking about which English player he might covet for Ireland.
I did an interview 15 minutes ago, and I was asked what England player would I want, if I could pick one, who would I want to bring across? Yeah. And I went through the whole thing, and then the journalist said, so that's none. And I then backtracked because I didn't want them to say none in his article. So I said, I fit Manu Tuilagi, but I don't think Manu would want to. Yeah, I don't think you're dropping either of our guys. So
did Paula get in our team?
Or
was it only BJ?
Yeah, I think Billy does. Yeah, I think that's. Maybe I should ring him back up and say Billy. Too late.
Yeah, it is too late. The headlines are already out there. He'll be sad to see. So that's England. Just to touch on the others today, Conor O'Shea was there. There are rumours of the two Laurens at Racing being linked to the Italian job. Conor O'Shea's contract goes through until 2020. Italy have lost 10 of 10 in the Six Nations under O'Shea, so he was talking about all that today.
We're going to Guinness Six Nations this year to, make ourselves proud as a country. Italy want to win games of rugby at the very highest level, not just be competitive. That's what you play for. But it's a process, and I want these guys to understand what that process involves. That we do, and then we have to go out and deliver it.
Conor, how frustrating has it been? You've spoken a lot about how you see the squad developing, but the results haven't always been there for the public to see.
Yeah, because we're playing at the highest level. If you want us to pick off a few, we'll play Belgium, Portugal, we'll get loads of wins and we'll all happy days. We're not about that. We play at the highest level. We've been competitive in so many games, but the game of rugby has moved on. leaps and bounds from the day that I retired, from the day Sergio started playing, and all the countries and the levels that they have. And we've had to make up for probably the neglect of a lot of years within the system, not of people not working hard, not of people not doing good jobs, of a system keeping up with everybody else. And now we're putting those piece by piece within the resources we have in place. But I look at the players we have, I look at the confidence that, not just Sergio, I'm saying Sergio because he's beside me, but the belief that they have in their own ability. And does that mean there's not going to be hard days? Of course not, there will be. But we've probably a lot of people didn't want us to beat Georgia. It didn't fit the story, did it? Beating Georgia, so no one talks about it. Fiji beat France. Well, we beat Fiji. Japan, brilliant win against South Africa in 2015. Well, we beat them in 2016, and we've beaten Japan. So that's the teams around us, but we want to be up at the highest level. So yes, the wins, losses, doesn't look, that's what we're judged on, and it's not, because we play at the highest level. But we're just going to go out every game and give everything we have as a coaching group, as a playing group, and together we will keep on driving this group.
Conor, it's never been done in the Six Nations era, but is it possible for a team to do back-to-back Grand Slams?
I think if someone does a Grand Slam this year, it will be an incredible achievement, because I just think the level of the competition is just enormous. And if you're slightly off your game, you'll come a cropper. You look at Wales, haven't lost 9 or 10 test matches. Scotland have the two teams in the Champions Cup quarters and will go in with confidence. Ireland are where they are, England, France and ourselves. But I think it's going to be very, very difficult to do that. I think if Ireland do back-to-back, they will be favourites for the World Cup, not New Zealand.
Yeah, there you go, Conor O'Shea. Keith, I'm not sure how concrete those rumours are about the two Laurens at Racing. Later on, O'Shea was asked about them, and he said, would I expect the Italian Federation to be looking at alternatives? They say they're not, but I hope they are. If they weren't, they would be slammed for not looking at alternatives. In 10 years' time, I want to be having a beer, sitting in the stadium and watching an Italian team do well, so that I can say I had a hand in its progress. So 10 for 10, if he goes 15 for 15 without a win, it's going to start getting very sticky, and yet he can only work with what he has as well. What does he have?
I think he's class. I played with Conor. I know what makes him tick. I know what he wanted to do when he went over to Italy. Was he saw a load of young guys coming through the under-20s that had played pretty well for 2 or 3 years. And he said, let's see what we can do and bring these guys to the forefront. It's taken him a while. He had fully got it. He has had 1 point there in the midst of it. The game is moving on at a ferocious rate. It really is. So they're getting better, but you're not seeing any benefit of it, because so is everybody else.
Yes.
And, and I would agree. I think this particular Six Nations was probably keeping him awake at night, because all the teams they're in form. They did well in the autumn. They did well over the summer. They have got players back. They look strong. It looks ready for a big 12 months. And he is trying to eke it along. I think he's got some decent guys that are coming into it. But even in what he's saying, that's not deflecting, saying that I hope Italy are looking at other people. He's an honest guy.
Yeah.
He wants them to do well. He will lose his job at some stage, or his job is over. His contract is over after the World Cup. And I whatever about the rumours that are going in there, he has a contract to go there. The World Cup is different, and they'll get hopefully a few games. Maybe they get a win, maybe they don't. It's very, very tough for them. This is a horrible year for him. But he would still want them to do well whenever he's gone. And he intimates to that point. That's true. That's the sort of guy he is. So he's brought a lot in. He's tried to do a huge amount of structural change, things that would bear fruit. He wished they'd bear fruit next week, but they may not bear fruit for a year, 2 years' time.
Yeah.
So, look, I think he has a different role. He's probably trying to tackle 3 or 4 roles from the head coach job. And there could even be a role there for him without being the head coach, because he's been a director of rugby at Harlequins. He's had a lot of different experiences. He's an intelligent guy. He has been in the midst of professional rugby since the start. and he is an aptitude you wouldn't want to lose in the game, and there'll be a value there, whether it's with the head coach role or not. So I just think it's a really tough year for him.
Yeah.
And the last thing he wants is our sympathy, because he just wants to get on and do the job and see if they can sneak a win or sneak 2 wins. But I just think it looks very, very tough for them.
Yeah. The clock is against us, Matt. We'll come back to Italy again, no doubt. So on the opening night, we're going to have Wales in Paris. Last year, Wales beat France in the last day. It's kind of hard to remember the last day beyond Twickenham, but they won 14-13. So Gatlin was talking today. Lee Halfpenny's going to be out of the first 2 games with that concussion issue, which continues. No Gareth Davies as well, and no Scott Williams. Jacques Brunel, 5 uncapped players in his squad. No Teddy Thomas for the Six Nations, which is a blow to them. They finished 4th last year, and we remember opening night in Paris last year. They did beat England in last year's Six Nations. In November, they lost to Fiji, and they lost to South Africa, and then obviously we're on tour in New Zealand. 52-11 was the worst result on their tour in New Zealand, and there have been worse results, I suppose. So, France, a word on them, and then Wales. I presume we don't want Wales going for a Grand Slam on that Paddy's weekend when Ireland have to go to Cardiff. We want their momentum interrupted at some stage.
Definitely. We don't want to be going to the Millennium with them with the spring sunshine on their backs if the roof's open, because the Irish record at Cardiff is not sensational. So there's a banana skin for them in Paris. The French team are always difficult to sum up in this era. I would have said before the Fiji game that they've made significant progress with Jacques Brunel and they'd improved, and then they came out in that Fiji game and they were absolutely appalling. So I would hope that that's for the good of the tournament, I would hope that that's a failure that they can learn from and that they'll progress. They're certainly a better side than they were last year. Jacques Brunel got a lot of criticism, what I thought was quite ignorant, and he's an exceptionally good coach. He was a former Italian coach, has a better record than Connor does, and I endorse everything Keith said about Connor being a wonderful bloke and a highly intelligent man. Jacques Brunel's a smart guy too. He's got some good men around him in that team. They're rebuilding. They've got good plans in place. They're doing a lot around French rugby from the Federation. Trying to bolster the ranks. They're trying to of the juniors and train them up in a better way. They're changing the number of foreign players that are allowed to play in the teams over the next few years, and that will take time to kick in. For this year's Six Nations, they're still going to put out a pretty good team. But they just have made so many errors over the last few years, so many unforced errors, and had such poor discipline. If their discipline was better last year, they certainly would have beaten Scotland and maybe one other. Again against Wales, they were just giving away ridiculous penalties. Now that seems to have been reined in. So it's exactly what we were saying. This is such a close competition with nothing between 4 of the sides. I think the Italians are right out the bottom end, unfortunately for Connor. But it would certainly not surprise me to see the French, come home with 3 wins, maybe more coming out of this and being contenders at some point in the last few days. And it also wouldn't surprise me if they came away with 1, because you just don't know what you're going to get with them. Where the Welsh are going to be a lot more consistent. It doesn't matter what their provinces have done. I think it's quite an irrelevancy where your provinces are and your club teams are. They pick the best 30-odd players and put them in. The Welsh are still going to produce a very, very good team. So it'll be a fascinating night. I'd like to see France win, to be really honest.
Okay. I will get to people's Heineken Star comments after the break. You're all in the mix for some very nice prizes, including matchday tickets and off-the-ball branded goodies. The clock very much against us. A busy couple of weeks ahead. Keith, Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Cheers, James.
Pleasure, Joe.
Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.